Welcome to the Wisdom of Show. I'm your host, Simon Bowen, and every week I'm speaking to the world's greatest leaders, thinkers, and entrepreneurs about complex issues and impactful leadership. Join us in the Renaissance of Wisdom. Well, welcome to the Wisdom of Anuradha Muralidharan. This is really about getting deeper into the thought processes and the way that great leaders around the world deal with the challenges that are in front of them. You know, we live in an increasingly complex world, socially, politically, commercially. People are looking for tips, tricks, hacks. The world's impatient. The world's superficial, and yet we need greater wisdom. So, Anu, it's a joy to have you here, and I'm looking forward to us talking through some of these deeper lessons that, you know, you're able to share with people who are maybe at the start of the journey that you've been on, and people that are going to continue on the journey that you're on into the next phase. And it's a joy to have you here, and thank you for giving up this time for us.
Pleasure to be here.
So Anu joined Expensify in 2015, and that's a well-known brand. And I'm going to check this. You're principal strategist for fraud prevention, audits, bank relations, and all other operational efforts. There's an interesting line in all other operational efforts. Right? And then into COO, right? Driving the force behind the creation of the Expensify card. I'd love it if you just give everyone, tap into that background just for people to kind of get a sense of, kind of the breadth of knowledge and expertise that you're bringing to the table.
Absolutely. So you kind of hit on something very pertinent there, where I said all other operational things or stuff, or I don't know what I said. But the reason for that is I actually joined Expensify into, let's call it a non-position, because there was really no job requirements or specific role they were hiring for. I happened to be working with their CEO, still their CEO, still our CEO. And we just really had a great rapport, and I loved working with everybody else on the team. And I wasn't particularly happy with my job at that point in time. So it was a loosely defined pitch of, I can figure out how to do things. And this is a small team and everybody looks really overwhelmed. So maybe you can hire me. So that's just sort of how it started. And then my strategy was to show up to work every day and kind of figure out what are the things that absolutely need to get done, but no one really has the bandwidth to do them. And there were a lot of such things, to my good fortune. But it so happened that a lot of them fell in that fraud protection, payments, operational, bank audit area.
Yes.
Naturally, nobody wanted to do them because they were kind of boring, not exactly the most interesting work, but it served me really well because you had to sort of like understand a little bit of everything in order to do the job and to be successful at it. And that just gave me a ton of context on how I knew a little bit about everything, enough to be dangerous. So it just made me effective, and I was able to use it as a launching off point. So that kind of just remains my legacy, I think.
Well, firstly, that might be the most interesting bio I've heard. But there's also some deep lessons in there already that are worth unpacking. I've had the real pleasure and benefit of being able to have a couple of close conversations with Richard Branson in a couple of different settings. And one of the things that he talks very, very clearly about in is hire who, not how. And
Gotcha.
yeah, so when if he thinks he wants to start a bank, he will go and hire the executive team before he's got the bank.
Yeah.
And then the job of that executive team is find me a bank, right?
Yeah.
To buy the. So get people first, get the right people first. It's almost like let's find great people, and even if we don't have a job description for them, let's hire them, and then they'll figure out how to add value. And what is brilliant about what your story indicates is just go and add value.
Yeah.
Like almost let them try before they buy. Just go and add value and let them
Totally.
do what you like. That should be a life lesson for everybody, really. And too many people are figuring out how to get paid or how to make the
Yeah.
sale.
Yeah. I agree.
Before. Yep, go on.
I agree completely. So the I can't pretend that it was easy, but my attitude really was no job is too low for me, so long as it's critical to do and nobody has the bandwidth to do it. That's sort of how I figured out what my role was going to be and how I was going to carve my position. And sometimes it did feel demoralizing. It felt like I was doing things beneath me, so to speak. But I sort of always had that attitude of, no, it's worth doing if it's critical to do. And it's a stepping stone to something else. And that served me really well.
Well, I think there's some interesting observations, right? Fraud prevention might seem like tedious and boring work,
Yeah,
but it's business critical.
totally.
And when people say, "Oh, is that job beneath me?" The question
Yeah,
maybe they should be asking is the job beneath the business or is it business
yeah,
critical? Because if
yeah,
it's business critical, it's worthy of being done.
totally.
And I love the idea of things that other people didn't have the bandwidth to do,
Yeah,
which means business critical, yet whether it's behind the scenes or more administrative or less creative,
yeah,
need to be done. And
yeah,
honestly, anyone that's been in business for any period of time knows that boring is profitable.
yeah,
It really is. When the business is
yeah,
just running smoothly and all the
yeah,
processes work and you know what your product is and you take it to market, entrepreneurs particularly get bored with their own product and start to reinvent it
yeah,
and can destroy the market advantage they have. So,
absolutely.
is anything really below us? Do you know what I mean? I love,
Yeah,
I love, I love that story just straight out of the gate. And I mean, there's so many little lessons in that, but we live in a world where everybody wants to get paid first or make the sale first and then deliver the value.
yeah,
And, people are happier to pay when
yeah,
they see or experience part of that value up front.
I agree.
We all want to go and try the clothes on before we take them to the counter to buy them.
For sure.
It's kind of that simple. Let's talk about this through the lens of your story,
Yeah.
but then apply it more and in the same way apply it more broadly to people. So if we think about, Expensify is a multidimensional business, but you've been in the tech sector for a while,
Hmm. Yeah.
parts of it. What
Yeah.
and it's increasingly complex world with AI and everything
For
else.
sure.
So I'm really interested in what you see as some of the key leadership qualities
Mm.
for leaders, particularly in the technology spaces.
I would say there is probably three things, at least in my point of view, and what I'm always striving to be good at. The first one is the ability to develop a point of view, because most of the time people are willing to talk themselves in circles, but nobody wants to draw a line in the sand
Mm,
because it's scary. So, like the ability to just develop a point of view at all and state it. And then almost sounds like a contradiction, but it's not. The ability to change your mind, and to change your mind by looking for data to the extent that data is available and then following it. And so sometimes you develop a point of view, you start there, and then you go and collect evidence to see if your point of view holds water. And if it doesn't, which is so hard, when it doesn't, be willing to change your mind so that you're actually solving problems that are worth solving in the way that it's most efficient to solve them. And you're following your customers and you're following your data, you're following your activity.
mm,
And then the third is actually somewhat like a different skill, is to be able to work with smart people. Because if you're doing this right, you have a successful company which attracts smart people and you want to hire the smartest of the smart people. But if you hire smart people and they are analytical and they think about the things that you say are important and they're not going to just blindly follow you around, which means you have to take the mindset of influencing them rather than managing them. And that, I think, is kind of a difficult skill because before I worked at Marqeta and then at Expensify, I worked at very large banks and I worked at a really large tech company. And so much of the work that we did were just the influence factor, if you will, was merely someone having a certain position, like, a director told me to do it or a VP told me to do it. And I think that dynamic is kind of, in the tech world at least, is kind of falling apart because you can always get a great job. And if you're smart, you can go somewhere else and you want to be working on things that you believe in. And that requires your leaders to influence you, to inspire you, to build a case for what they want you to do rather than just tell you what to do.
Yeah, I love that. I love those three distinctions around it. And, particularly the idea of, develop a point of view, but then let data inform that. There's a difference between an opinion and a point of view. To form and hold on to an opinion, you need two things. First of all, you need some information that informs your opinion, and then you form an opinion. But the problem with opinion is to hold on to it, you have to ignore all evidence to the contrary.
Yep.
So to believe the world is flat, you must ignore all evidence
to
the contrary,
totally.
which is dangerous, right? But a point of view is different. Here's my point of view right now. A point of view is a moment in time.
That's
Here's my point of view right now. Oh, look at that evidence.
Yeah.
It's either reinforcing it or changing it.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to change it. I love your observations of smart people. The word influence comes from the Latin word fleur, F-L-E-U-R-E, which means flow. The word influence means to be in flow with people.
I love that.
So rather than just, you've got a smart person moving along and you go, bang, stop in front of them and go, do this now, move over here. A smart person's moving along and you get in flow with them and start tapping them so that they, those three things are just super insightful. And most
I'm going to steal that last part.
Okay.
If you hear me say it, I stole it from you.
Yeah, by all means. But particularly a lot of people are fearful of hiring smart people.
Definitely.
Yeah, but that means the company comes down to one smart person, which is dangerous. So,
totally.
so we're leaning into this idea of high performing teams, high performing people, and listening to your background. There are teams sometimes that are actually high performing generalists. I think dealing with smart people, high performing people who are specialists in an area has a certain skill set, but high performing generalists who might not have a job description sound familiar to you, who might be there to deal with the bandwidth everyone has difficulty matching. What are some of the strategies and things that you've used to really, really inspire and influence, teams of high performing generalists?
Yeah. So you actually kind of took the words out of my mouth just in the previous comment you made about how a lot of people are fearful of hiring smart people. I heard this quote at one point in time, and I didn't even know who it was attributed to till later. I wanted to use it, and I checked, and apparently it was Steve Jobs, of course. But he has an observation that A players hire A players, but your B players always want to hire C players because they're trying to look good.
Yeah.
And then so on and so forth. You go into a spiral and the organization kind of is in a death spiral at that point because C hires D, D hires E, and you've got a mess on your hands. I've always thought that was very insightful because I find that smart people always want to work with people smarter than them because they learn more, they grow more. And then people that don't really want to work that hard, and smart is even sort of almost a misnomer because you're not born with this. A lot of people have great IQ, but the thing that we are talking about is a level of grit, a level of hard work, the drive to learn new things and grow, a growth mindset. So people like that want to be inspired rather than just look good. And if you look good in a room, it means you're surrounded by others that are not necessarily as good as you if you consistently look good, So the first thing really is in managing a high performing or like even hiring and maintaining a high performing generalist team is to never let that hiring standard down even for a second. Always hire A players because they will maintain that bar high. And then just based on my journey, a lot of the things I did at Expensify I'd never done before. And so when I started doing them, I was full of doubt and I second guessed myself a lot. And I couldn't stop thinking that there may be a better way to do this. I just don't know. I'm just following what I think is right. Is that right or not?
Yeah.
And a lot of the reasons that I grew was because I had an organization that took a chance on me and allowed me to make mistakes and learn from them. And so I think that's really critical too. Like you hire really smart people and then say you just like create a claustrophobic environment where you micromanage them.
Yeah.
That's just never going to work. So hire smart people, never let the bar down, and then actually give them room to make decisions and fail within reason, because that's the only way your next generation of leaders are going to grow. There was also a really cool quote. I was listening to this podcast by Bezos, and he was saying how there's this phrase he uses all the time: disagree but commit. And I really loved it because it's really difficult to do. So say you're having a debate with somebody and they want to approach it a certain way and you disagree. His point is you try to influence them, but if you are unable to do so, then commit to the decision. Don't hold on to that disagreement and try to prove them wrong, or at every step of the way try to veer them off course. Instead, just commit fully. And if it's wrong, it's wrong. If it's right, it's right. It's anywhere in between, it's anywhere in between. You can't go really wrong because you learn from it. I think that's been my go-to. And out of that, when people grow and they shine, it's 90% credit to them for sure, but you have this sense of satisfaction that you caused that. And I think that's a huge part of what makes working fun.
Yeah, that's super interesting. You know, I meet a lot of interesting people doing this show, and it's just fascinating how many of them say, I was listening to this podcast with so-and-so, or I was like,
Yeah,
thinkers in the world are fueling their thinking all the time. They're always
totally.
self-driven learners. I love I love the, A players, high A players, B players, high C players. And I love the disagree, then commit. It sparked this thought in my mind, we might disagree on something, but at some point, if we are still in disagreement, one of us actually has to commit to
Totally.
the decision of the other one
Yeah.
for us to move forward and even see if it would work. And I could be wrong. So let's move forward. The alternative to commit is conflict. You either commit or you go into conflict,
Yeah.
and conflict will
Good
never
point.
work
Yeah.
over the long term. So just really interesting observations. So, we live in a world that is changing significantly daily, technologically, and technological change drives huge social change. That do go hand in hand. And so, what are some of the leadership challenges in the company setting?
Yeah.
Maybe even in terms of, society, because
Yeah.
companies create technology that drives social change. What are some of the leadership challenges that you're thinking through all the time
Yeah.
while you're in a senior role
Yeah.
in space?
I think the words or like the latest technology that we can't seem to escape wherever we go is AI. And it's funny because along the way, it's not just AI and not just the fact that it has the potential to displace human employees in the workspace, but rather any kind of pivot in the company. Like I feel they share the same characteristics. Like if you pivot from, oh, we've done brand marketing so far, but now what we need is the ability to do much more targeted product marketing. Any kind of pivot like that requires a different skill set just causes people to panic. And the thing that I lean into, and the way that I manage my own fears too, is to understand and remind people that what they can do isn't fixed. What I can do isn't fixed. I hope it isn't fixed because that would be really boring. So I think the focus, or my focus really is in, let's stop thinking about what will happen if this job goes away. I hope that job goes away because you've been doing it for X number of years. Let's figure out what else you can do and how to make that interesting and how to sort of find the intersection between that and what's important for the business to level up, because that's cool and that's going to improve all our lives. So we are finding that there's a lot of efficiencies we can get by using AI in various areas of the business, like so many others are right now. But simultaneously, what we are noticing is when we lean into that sort of mindset with our employees, they feel liberated enough to go explore what else they can do and how that can add value. And we found a lot of shifts. Like we used AI to automate a huge part of our support workflow.
Yep.
And we saw that most of our support team actually leveled up to become really strong account managers. And a bunch of them actually moved on to become product managers at the company because, they've been talking to customers, supporting customers, dealing with the most complex issues one-on-one with customers for so long that they are really the untapped resource for how to build and make the product much more efficient.
Yeah.
And when we give them the space to lean into that, they do. And we have a very efficient organization because we do that over and over again and we do it well. I'm not going to pretend there's not collateral damage. Like not everybody's able to do that, but by and large, when people are willing, they're able to do it. Ultimately, I don't think the people that don't do it will agree with my point of view, but I think we end up doing what we want to do. And so if your desire isn't there, then you're never going to learn it. It's not that that thing was hard. So there's some of that, but we've just kept the focus on find efficiencies, level people up.
Yeah. It's interesting. Every time technology changes, if you imagine a line, and we call it the technology line, every time technology changes, it displaces human contribution below that line. We've had seismic shifts before, the industrial age, manufacturing automation, the internet, communications technology, right? And every time that line shifted, it displaced the human contribution below that line. But humans have always managed to find the next level of invention for the human contribution because, I love your word bandwidth, until that technology came in, the bandwidth was occupied by this level. Technology came in, freed them up, bandwidth became available. Now we can make a contribution at a higher level. And there is always collateral damage. But, if leaders are being honest with themselves, there's probably more collateral damage in the world right now through poor management and leadership than there is through AI. And the companies that ignore AI will end up laying off a whole lot of people in redundancy because they'll lose their place in the market.
That's a very good point, actually. I was listening to a fireside chat with Jensen Huang, and he was saying that. And I thought it was, in retrospect, it's like so obvious, but when he said it, it was like a lightning bolt. It's like, what you need to fear isn't AI. You need to fear the next company that uses AI better than you.
Yes.
So that just is exactly what you're saying. It just makes sense. Like, don't be scared of new technology. Figure out how to use it.
Yeah.
And keep your people.
And, a little private mission I've been on for a long time. I've been a corporate consultant for 30 odd years. I've been an executive leader in companies. And I think we've dehumanized the corporation over a number of decades. And I think AI represents the opportunity to rehumanize in so many levels. There's things that AI doesn't do. AI is great at concepts, constructs, content. AI is not good yet at context.
Yeah.
And context gives everything meaning. But AI is also not good at compassion and conscience.
Yes.
AI you should not trust the ethical, legal, moral fabric of your company to AI right now,
For sure. I mean, it is, after all, just still a bot and will generate. And especially when you say generative AI and then you say, whoa, it made stuff up. Yeah, it's generative AI. It was meant to do that. So up to you to make sure what it made up makes sense.
Well, that's right. And, I've seen people get so lost inside an AI bot that what they've produced is actually not great.
Yeah.
But they've just assumed it's kind of market leading because it came out of an AI tool, right?
Yeah.
And not market leading at all. Like real value will probably be a human judgment because value itself is always a huge human judgment.
Absolutely.
You know, so, you know, a human should look at what another human's going to judge, at least in the medium
Yeah,
term. We don't know where it'll all head, but I think people will reinvent themselves at a higher level, and the collateral damage is real. We need to be mindful of that. There are
for
always,
sure.
you know, people
Yeah.
involved in this. Um, so let's talk about that human-centered kind of approach. You know, it's um, recently I've been talking about you know, someone that I was doing some work with said, you know, we should get people to go and use some AI tools to scan their website and then scan competitors' websites and build word
Yeah.
clouds and do comparative analysis of what is their market messaging and blah, 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 blah. And I said, that's great. So do an AI scan, but, you know, do a human scan as well. Like look at the websites through the lens of a customer who doesn't know
Yep. Yep.
anything, and they're just
Yeah.
looking at it to figure things out, right? AI knows too much.
Yeah.
It's not going to do a human scan of a customer who does not have the behind the scenes knowledge of what that
That's very
website's trying to
interesting.
communicate.
That's very interesting. You're saying if you just used AI to compare two websites and you're like, this website does this, does it better, and the humans just not really looking at it like an
No.
AI is looking at it. Yeah, that would be wild.
Well, I have this, you know, we help people. You know, I work with what I call the OGs of an industry. And,
Yep.
you know, these are the people that have original genius. OG in my world means original genius. You know,
Yep.
at some point, a founder or someone came up with a unique way of pulling together and curating a collection
Mm.
of tools and thoughts and ideas, and they brought a, you know, a significant product to market. And um, you know, then that almost immediately gets commodified. Competitors jump
Mm.
in and start doing the same thing. And we help those people unpack that company genius into a single powerful visual model that allows you to show that to people in about 7 minutes. It's a
Yeah.
very powerful process.
Yeah.
Um, and at the core of the model is a really key piece that we call the $1 million promise, right? And
Yeah.
it's the hardest thing to find. And often I'm working with clients and they go, I can't think of it. I can't think of it. I go, could it be this? And I
Yeah.
spit out, you know, $1 million promise. And they go, oh, you're a genius. That's so smart. Like, how did you come up with that? And I go, I'm looking at your website. I got it off, I got it off the about
That's
page.
awesome.
So two
You're like
questions.
you have the
Why is it on
benefit
the,
of distance, right?
yeah,
Like you have the
correct.
benefit of looking at it from a third party point of view, and the
Yes.
person that's steeped in it just made it too
Oh,
complicated.
and it's been 5 years since I looked at it, right?
Yeah.
So two questions. You've got great stuff on your website. The second question is, why is it in your about page? You know, it's like,
Yeah. Who goes
it's
there?
yeah, well, it's staggering. It's the first page I go to on websites because often
I
the
see.
story is in there.
Mm.
And the story of the genius that a company brings to market, the story is where the genius lives.
Yeah.
But
Interesting.
we're often not selling that, right? We're
Yeah.
not communicating that.
Yeah.
So so let's talk about innovation,
Yeah.
and let's talk about how you foster that culture of innovation at Expensify.
So we are, and I actually learned this in my time at Expensify. I want to say 32 years old when I joined the company.
Yeah.
So I'd already worked for 8 years or so. And I had a very different approach for those 8 years. And I completely changed my approach when I joined Expensify. And it served me really well, but also the company culture is generally, I went with the flow of the company culture and within the limitations to the fact that I was sort of making up my role as I went. Every single problem that I was trying to solve had no written down process for it. Just kind of didn't know how to do it. And so, almost out of a necessity, I reinvented the wheel all the time. And when you are reinventing the wheel, so to speak, when you're trying to figure out how to do something from scratch, the only way to do it is to use a common sense approach, which is more eloquently, I guess, called a first principles approach. I
Yeah.
always said, I just use your common sense. Like, what would you do? And I said earlier, this used to happen all the time. I would constantly second guess myself. And I would constantly go, I just wrote this down using just common sense. I have no subject matter expertise. But then I would I'm the only one doing it. No one else is stopping me. So I would just kind of go forward. I think I kind of stumbled into a lot of the innovations that we created in literally every area I've worked in, starting with how we do fraud prevention for our payment products, and then how we built, I think publicly we've called it the Expensify Marketplace, but really it's a jobs platform that we use to sort of distribute our micro units of jobs to a global workforce. Then the way we built our card, the way we do the authorizing on that card and the controls we built on the card, all of it, every single one of them has something innovative about it. But it didn't come to be because we said, let's build something truly innovative. Instead, we said, what is the problem we need to solve? And how do we, instead of leaping to how everybody else solves it, let's just have a common sense approach to how we would solve it. And then don't do it in a bubble, figure that out, and then get feedback. Then look at how everybody else is doing it and compare and see if your solution can be made better. And that process has helped me over and over again. And in general, that's the process we encourage everybody to take at the company as well. Like, start with your idea, start with your solution, and then build on it by asking whoever you need to ask in order to feel confident that your end product is the best possible outcome. And it's not the easiest path the first couple of times you take it, but the third or fourth time, you can't even imagine taking another path because it just works every time.
Here's the little secret about innovation. The process of innovation is not that innovative.
It's true.
It's the process of simplification.
Yep.
And simplification is the greatest form of sophisticated thinking we have. You know, E equals MC squared, I think, is probably the global example of simplification. And yet it's the most innovative formula in physics, right? And so this simplification is some of the most innovative things have come from somebody who does not have sort of domain expertise or subject expertise. Saying, but why don't you just do it like this? And everyone goes, oh, that's interesting.
That could work.
No, yeah. And I think the other thing about innovation that you've hit on, and it's a word you used earlier, you know, one of the keys to innovation actually is grit. Let's just stick at it until we figure it out. You know, it's you know, true innovation is seldom you know, found in a kind of a blinding flash of genius. It usually comes from just people have worked at this for a while and understood it at a very, you know, an extremely sophisticated but simplified sort of level. And so you spoke a little bit about the Expensify marketplace. You know, we have this marketplace. I'm sure there's a strategic story in that. You know, you know, you kind of went, oh, we've got the Expensify marketplace. My little radar's learnt to notice when someone says, oh, we've got this thing, and there's usually a pretty kind of key strategic story behind it at a company level. Are you able to maybe expand on that and the role that plays?
Yeah, totally. So we basically, I want to say this was in 2017 or 18, I think. Basically, one of our most innovative capabilities that even today, when I go to conferences, somebody I'm talking to will say, oh, we use Expensify. I love your receipt scan. Receipt scan has always been huge. And now it almost feels cute to say it because everybody has it, but it was a key feature and remains a key feature, although a little bit more of a commodity now.
Yes.
So when we first launched it, the problem was, I mean, till ChatGPT 4.0, this has been true, but in 2018, it was very much true that all manner of OCR was really horrible. Like the accuracy rates were so bad that you couldn't really have a technical solution to this. And if you did, your accuracy would be so poor. Why would anybody use that? Like if you're wrong more than 50% of the time, I might as well just enter it. It doesn't take that much time, right? If I have to correct it every other time, it doesn't work. So we had built our smart scan capabilities exclusively around, we did some OCR, but it was a minimum. And then the vast majority got actually human transcribed. And so then, you know, we slowly, our volume, you know, we were very lucky, our volume of users kept growing so fast. And each user brings with them like 10x the receipt volume, right? So the receipt volume was just growing even faster. So we had to keep getting more and more ways to scale, or like keep finding more and more vendors that could help us very quickly scale that workforce. And so we kind of kept taping it together. And the problem was each vendor brought their own tools. So now we were sending receipts to these various tools. They managed performance, accuracy differently, and became a huge mess at a point in time where the volume grew, and we had 3 of those vendors. So it was a solution to that problem. Like, we need one platform that we put our jobs on. We have our own prioritization engine in terms of who it gets assigned to, our own logic. And then every vendor should just be sourcing people onto that platform. And we need to be able to run this platform really efficiently. Its uptime, scalability needs to be really high. And then we need to have our own logic for how we calculate accuracy. So that was the problem the platform solved. It wasn't like we were like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to build a marketplace? It was, we need this problem solved. And initially we were going to solve it, and this is all public, so you'll find it if you look it up. We tried to solve it using Mechanical Turk. Amazon has a very similar jobs platform, and they have a global marketplace, if you will, like people that want to do jobs like this. And generally they live in developing countries, and they do it like on their way to school or stay-at-home moms. And so we were going to use that, but we started a beta and it blew up. Somebody found the beta and put it on Twitter and started this big, I don't even know what to call it, like rumor or like a fear-mongering exercise that all the customer data was leaked. And we were just like, wait, what? No, this is a receipt. Like, there's no PII on a receipt. You don't put your name and your address on it. So we just very quickly after that, it was, of course, it was Thanksgiving weekend. And so all our Thanksgiving got ruined. We had to take it all down. And that's when I volunteered to write a design so we could internally build our own platform. And I want to say like 5 or 6 engineers worked on that with me. And it was a big effort at the time. And I've almost forgotten about it now. It has since worked really well for us.
So, you know, strategically, if I've understood this correctly, you've been able to build a solution that allows you to access a truly distributed global workforce.
Yep.
And retain the control that you might want to have from an entirely internally employed workforce.
Absolutely.
Which is super cool, right? And is an absolute competitive advantage.
Yeah.
You know, the world of work has has changed. And you know, we think about the exponential organizations now that are using unused resources around the world, idle resources in clever ways. I mean, that's one of the keys of the Salim Ismail with the exponential organization, his work around that.
Interesting.
And so one of the 3 keys of an exponential organization is they make full use of under engaged, underemployed assets or resources.
Yeah.
You know? But control's an issue, right? And you've managed to solve that. Yeah.
And that's the key, actually. You're nail on the head, because what you want is to use a global workforce, but you don't want to put the exact thing that happened to us. You don't want to put your jobs, no matter what those jobs contain, onto a platform that just exposes them without an ability to vet the organizations that bring those people to you. So this, like, background checks and things like that built into the platform, which helps you have a level of trust. And, our dream, and we haven't really prioritized it, but my dream is to use that in other contexts. Like, for instance, Expensify at the smallest level, like for a company that's 1 to 5 employees, and there's a lot of them, to use is really simple. So one of the dreams that we've had is to let anybody say that I will help you on board because I understand this platform. And then customers can take them up on it, and then they can pay them whatever they think is the right amount for the onboarding, and create an economy around this, which just removes us from having to do white glove support for every small account, but also enables them to get really good and create jobs for people, and it's just win-win.
Yeah. It's a, you know, it's a complete solution at both ends,
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
of the spectrum in terms of who's operating that. I've got a couple of questions. We're pushing up against, you know, the time boundary, but
Yep.
I've got a couple of questions I'd love us to, and then just before we finish, I'd love to ask you kind of three
Yeah.
quick response questions for us to kind of know a bit more about, you know,
Yeah.
you. But I have to ask, you know, how you process and work through your moral. I mean, you hinted on it when, you know, we put it onto a platform and then people started saying all your data's being leaked. You know,
Yeah.
the processing you go through from the moral and ethical perspective when you're in this
Yeah.
work, you're
Yeah.
leading in a company at a senior level,
Yeah.
and that company is actually impacting lots and lots of people in lots and lots of ways. I'm not
Yeah.
even sure what I'm asking you, other than how do you work your way through the moral and ethical challenges that all leaders are
Yeah.
confronted with?
In the beginning, and that's a good example, actually, great segue. In the beginning, when it started to become an issue and was gaining kind of traction on Twitter, a part of me felt very resentful. It just was an inconvenience, and this is not a threat. First of all, it's just a beta of our company receipts at that point. But even otherwise, there's no PII on receipts. This is not going to create any, just this whole thing felt like just a headache. But slowly I realized, and over again, I've realized the same thing. Telling somebody that is scared about something to just calm down never works. And if those are your customers, I think you should take their fears seriously and find a suitable solution, which is ultimately what we did here. We took it down and built our own platform. And it almost taught us what are the things people are scared of, because then we could make sure we built our platform to control for those fears already. And now when we think about using ChatGPT, we still, like we just talked about this. Oh, remember that? Like we need to make sure all those same things are not goof ups we make again.
Yeah.
So think in general, like take people's fears seriously. And if they exist and that's your customer, then it's important. Figure out how you can control for them, because telling them to just not worry about it isn't really going to work for you and never really works for anybody in any relationship. That's one. The other is probably people related. The thing that's always really, really tough, and I don't know, maybe it's because I don't want to typecast, but more women are more empathetic than the average man. So I don't know if that's a factor, but it's always difficult to make personnel decisions. And it's always difficult we always give people a lot of chances to kind of rehab their performance. If it's not working, then try to like rebalance their workload. We try a lot. And when the time comes to say, okay, it's not working, that's always difficult. It's not like it's a moral or ethical dilemma, but it's just a icky thing to do. But it goes back to what I was saying about the A players. You have to do it, because if not, you are going back on your commitment to all your star players. And that's not acceptable either. So that, I would say, has been one of the most difficult parts of, you have to make tough decisions and it never feels good, but you do it in service of your team, your star performers, your company, and just trust that you were a good person about it.
Yeah, I mean, what a great framing. Do it in service, and trust that you're a good person about it. It's the thing about ethical dilemmas. Yeah, I went through university when you had to study philosophy as a part of your undergraduate. I don't know that that's necessarily the case these days.
Yeah.
But studying philosophy and ethics is a really good foundation. And it's this age-old debate of does the end justify the means?
Yeah.
Or do the means justify the ends, right? One of the real observations about ethics is it depends what your perspective is.
Yeah.
So if you are affected by the end, then the end is all that matters to you. But if you're affected by the process to get there, then that is all that matters to you. There's no one ethical answer. So you've got to look at it from all angles, exactly what you're saying. If they're fearful about something, you can't just tell them to calm down, it's going to be okay. You've got to see it through their perspective. And there's this really interesting body of work done around fairness.
Yeah.
And fairness is almost hardwired into primates. There's really interesting,
Interesting.
really
Huh.
interesting video on YouTube where, a professor's showing these two monkeys being given
Yeah.
rewards for
Yeah.
tasks that they do. They do the
Okay.
same task. One gets cucumber
Mm-hmm.
and the other one gets grapes. And
Okay.
grapes are much higher
Mm.
on the food preference for these monkeys. And the
Yeah.
one that gets the cucumber first, does the task, gets the cucumber, eats the cucumbers, perfectly happy. The
Yeah.
next one does the task, gets grapes. The first one sees that's not fair, does the
Okay.
task again and gets cucumber, and
Huh.
throws the cucumber back at the scientist and loses its mind, and then sees the
Huh.
other one get grapes. It understands a lack of fairness.
Yeah.
And so the
That's
question is,
amazing.
the
Yeah.
question is this fair? There's this great tool that Rotary have used for years called the four-way test. So any
Mm.
decision you make,
Mm-hmm.
is it based on truth? Yes or
Yeah.
no? Is it fair? Yes or no? Is it beneficial to everyone concerned? Yes or no? Will it build goodwill? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Pass it through those four questions, and if you get a no to any one of those four questions, think it through again.
Yeah. Yeah.
We need these little quick tests that we can
Yeah.
apply, but
Mm.
fairness is a starting point.
I love
What
that
about,
monkey experiment.
look it up on YouTube.
I will.
Um,
Mm.
just you type in, monkeys and fairness or something like
Okay.
that, and you'll
Yeah.
find it.
Yeah.
It's actually a TED talk. It's an excerpt from a TED
Okay.
talk. Some quick questions so people can know you a little bit
Yeah.
better. What's the most recent book that you've read and loved?
Hmm. I read this book by Jill Bolte Taylor, I believe her name is. She did a TED talk, incidentally. I believe one of the most popular TED talks ever. And her book that I read, I meant to read another book, but I picked up the wrong one, but it was amazing. It's called Whole Brain Living.
Ah,
Highly recommend it. Very interesting. So, really, I know you said to answer it quick, but it's so rich. Jill Bolte Taylor is a neuroanatomist, I want to
wow.
say. And she actually had a brain aneurysm. And when she had that brain aneurysm, she had this entire experience where her left side of her brain just shut down.
Wow.
She was operating on just the right side of her brain. And she discovered all these things about how the various hemispheres of your brain behave. So the book is all about how there's actually four characters in your brain optimizing for different things. And the strategies she teaches you are when you're having an episode or like when you're trying to make a good decision, like try to have a brain huddle and recognize which character is like in center stage, but which character do you want to be in center stage? And so can, like optimize around it. Fascinating.
Wowee. Yeah, absolutely fascinating. Goodness me. Um, and so I'll just ask one more question rather than the two. If
Yeah.
you could instantly master any skill, but you didn't have to practice,
Mm.
it's like, there it is.
Yeah,
What would that be?
that's easy. I'm an extremely impatient person. And I'm convinced all of my life's problems stem from my impatience because I just can't really wait for the result, but I also can't quit. So I torture myself. And once I get the result I want, I'm just like, why did I have to make that so difficult? So I want to overnight be the most patient person on earth that will just like work with grit and never tire. And I'll use it to conquer the world, I think.
Yeah, well, you probably would if you had those qualities, because I don't think you're alone in wanting that. That might be a fairly widespread, desire. The most
Desire,
patient person in the world who never tires. Wouldn't that be
for sure.
amazing? And that's a great place to finish, Anu. Look, I hope that the audience of this episode, what you've shared is truly insightful. My hope actually is that people go and put it to work. Think about how they,
Yep.
how they kind of drive innovation. Think about how they work with smart people. Think
Yep.
about, setting an environment where smart people attract other smart people. Think
Yep.
about how they, tap into the global marketplace of smart people, but in a way that still gives you control and the ability for strategic and competitive advantage in your company.
Yep.
think about how you lead in a rapidly changing technological and social landscape. So many things that you've shared with us. I really
Yeah.
appreciate you giving us this time and sharing your wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.